Thank you. Not even my parents welcome me home like that. Good night, everybody. My name is Aubrey Sherman. I am the Diversity Coordinator and Interim Programming Coordinator for the Johnny Development Institute. Thank you, one and all, for coming out tonight. Here, we gather today to voice our opinions, thoughts, and concerns to an audience that normally wouldn't hear our firsthand accounts otherwise. This event came about a few months ago when the head coordinator of the JDI, Sam Rengo, and I were talking. We were talking about ways in which we can get the active student body involved as much as possible. That being people who normally wouldn't meet with our panelists on a day-to-day basis, or maybe just be on first name basis with them. And this kind of developed from a brainchild into an actual thing. So introducing our panelists from right to left. First off, if we could just give a round of applause after I say their name. I know we're excited, Cormac, come on. Here we have President Bruess of CSB and SJU. So. Have the Provost, Richard Ice. The Associate Provost for Student Success, Mary Geller. And he is the head honcho of the MCC, Multicultural Center. Please give it up for Malik. Now, I can go on for hours and hours up here. Trust me, I can. But you're not here to hear my voice, you're here to hear theirs. So without further ado, please take it away, guys.
Yeah, well, first, thanks everyone for being here tonight. It's nice to see a lot of faces, old and new. Some of you are a long ways away. The front rows are open. None of us have COVID, so I encourage you to come up a little bit closer. I think Aubrey did a great job of listing out the purpose of this event, and my role in this event is to be the moderator. And so what I'm going to do is to pass questions to our panelists, encourage you to share what you have, and maybe at times do some interpreting. So I think maybe we can start, and each panelist can share a little bit, one in your specific roles at the colleges, your vision for an anti-racist multicultural community, and what does that mean in your role? What does that mean to you? And how do you plan to make that a reality here?
Oh, I get to go first? Well, I wrote a statement. And because I was reflecting on these actually the questions that Malik had sent, and then I realized I was supposed to have an opening statement. And so this is just something that that came to me as I was reflecting on preparing for tonight. Well, first of all, I want to thank the JDI in particular for hosting the event tonight. And my perspective is primarily that of the students. I'm here to kind of, I represent or oversee, manage the student experience, primarily outside the classroom at St. John's and St. Ben's. So my viewpoint is going to be coming from that perspective. So every student deserves the opportunity to learn, develop, and grow into their fullest and best version of themselves as scholars and human beings here at CSB and SJU. It is our work to provide environments that allow each student to flourish within the mission and Benedictine values of our institutions. That happens when a student feels safe, seen, included, and has a deep sense of belonging to this community. There are attractors and detractors to achieving this goal. Our job is to remove as many of the detractors and to ensure as many of the attractors as possible. Our policies, practices, and people are all methods in which to provide the ideal environment for all students to reach their fullest potential. I fully recognize and embrace my responsibility in this work as a campus leader. As such, I am deeply involved in my own personal work around issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. As part of that work, I have a list of questions I review on the regular, and I invite you to consider these simple questions as well. Because this is not just the work of leadership. This is the work of all of us as a community. And so I invite you into my questions. What do I actively do to create a more inclusive community? How do my behaviors and actions reflect respect and inclusion? And how don't they? Do I treat each person I meet with infinite dignity, as our Benedictine values call us to do? Where do I need to do more work? Do I call people out, or do I invite people in to learning and being in right relationship with me? Inclusion, as I always say, is every day, everywhere, everyone. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, she's looking at me. My name is Richard Ice, and I'm the Provost. I am oversee at large the student experience, but I think today I'm representing the academic side of that and looking more specific that way. Although I don't think we can isolate and separate these experiences, because what happens outside the classroom affects what's inside the classroom and vice versa. So we have to think in a very holistic way. For me, the importance here about inclusion is belonging and justice. And certainly everyone feeling a sense of belonging so that it helps that everyone is able to achieve their academic goals and to work up to their greatest academic potential. And it's about the barriers, as Mary said, and figuring out how we can overcome those barriers. And those barriers are complicated, they are complex, they cross all kinds of boundaries, and many of us are blind to them. And so a big part of what our work has to be is understanding, and understanding what those barriers are, and then helping to figure out how to break them down for everyone to be able to succeed. And I'm glad to be here tonight to talk about some of the things that we are doing with the faculty, with staff, to take a look at the barriers that we need to overcome that are systemic and that we are blind to, and how do we take those blinders off and help everyone to reach their academic potential. So I'm going to leave it for more questions here.
Yes, and I'm Brian, as was indicated, the president of St. Ben St. John's, and it's a privilege to be here. And I want to echo what Mary and Richard have shared and just share a little bit of my point of view. I think the primary role of the president on this matter is to help create conditions for the kind of learning and kind of aspirational goals we have for ourselves around our mission. So when we localize this work very personally, there's individual work to do for sure, but there's communal work. And we know that it begins almost as in a Maslow's hierarchy kind of way. Very basic ideas of feeling belonging and connected. But we have much higher aspirations. To be an anti-racist institution, to be a multicultural institution, we have to go far beyond that very foundational sense of belonging into the more sophisticated ways of constructing learning spaces, living spaces, being together in the curriculum and the co-curriculum, where we really truly are committed to understanding the dignity of each human person, where we really truly are committed to the common good, and that we're creating conditions for this kind of growth and development to happen. And part of what is required in that is approaching it from a systems perspective. The kinds of work we're doing to be anti-racist, to be multicultural, requires us to confront the realities of the systemic nature that is rooted in bias, that's rooted in racism, discrimination. And that's hard work. To bring that out in the open, to talk about it and to work it through, that's a part of doing individual work, as Mary described. It's also a part of doing communal work. And if I could choose, when I think of my vision for this work, it's a collective effort. And if we could approach it from a systems perspective collectively, the work that was done this last few years through the Mellon Grant, Becoming Community, if you've not dug into that work and studied that work, it's pretty significant. It's based on this idea of transformational inclusion. And the word becoming community suggests that we're on a journey of becoming something more aspirational than we know ourselves to be today. The final thing that I would say about vision for this work is that it always kind of sobers me up when I think about how many years I've been in higher education, but more than 30 years. We'll just leave it at that. One of the things that's most troubling to me over that 30 years of being at now four institutions that are really committed to this work, what's ringing in my ears is how familiar the voices are of the students that I've been listening to for 30 years. The stories are so often the same, repeated from generation to generation. And what that's taught me is that our work we're doing here is systemic in nature. What that's taught me is it takes more of us. For those of you that came tonight to be in this conversation, this auditorium holds more people than are seated in it today. We need more people engaged in this work, working from a systems point of view, working to this aspirational ideals we hold for ourselves. And I'm really, it's great joy to be in the work, but it's painful work. And so committing to it together is a part of our collective work.
I think we have, just for the, first of all, thank you everyone for for sharing. There are 2 microphones on either side of the auditorium here. I have a few additional things that I've prepared, but we really also wanted to make sure that there was time for students. And so I encourage you, if you have a question, if you have a comment, if there's something you'd like to share, to go up to one of the 2 mics here and use that time. I think maybe in the interim, while we're waiting for our first question, I know there's somebody who's going to come up and ask, so do it soon. I think in the short term, though, I might throw just a question to you, Richard. Can you talk about the new curriculum? Why did the curriculum change, and then how does that new curriculum promote diversity and equity?
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good question. A lot of times when a curriculum is put together, it's put together thinking about what classes students should take. When we put this curriculum together, we did the reverse. We thought about what are the things that students need to know and value. And then we put together what are the kinds of things that need to be in the classes, rather than saying, oh, take that particular class. The faculty took very seriously issues about belonging and inclusion and justice. And so we have courses that are required of everyone to think about race, gender, culture, social, economic, and how those things tie in to your identity. And what's it mean to think about what your identity is and how you interact with others. Those courses build on each other so that we also have later in the curriculum thinking how those identities have systemic connections. And so it's getting students not to just take a one and done class, but to think more deeply, to think more critically and complexly about what it means to have an identity and what's it mean for that identity in our culture. We also intended to make sure we talked about the culture we're in here. And so a domestic/American culture, so that we don't just think of identity as something that's happening out there, right? But how does it happen here where we're at? Then we also add the other complexity to all of this, which is the global part. And how does that frame the issue? So we have looked at this from multiple perspectives, and we want students to think in a more critical way about identity, how identity plays out in society, how it is systemic, some of the decisions that get made, and also the intersectionality of your identity. You're not just one thing, right? You have multiple parts of your identity, and to reflect on that and to think about what that means in society and how those different identities interact. So that's the real key work for us in thinking about the curriculum. It's about putting it throughout the curriculum and what we call in education scaffolding, so that there's a basic knowledge that first year the students are here and they take the class, and then as you go and advance through the curriculum, you get more complex ideas and theories about how this works. This is the first time that we've had a curriculum that really took this seriously and that embedded it within the curriculum for everybody to have. And it's not that you just spend a week talking about this in a particular class. It has to be the focus of the course.
I want to just follow up on that if I can. Provost Ice is giving a really good example when we talk about systemic approaches to EDIBJ work. Embedding this in the way that he's described in the curriculum is one, I think, major effort on that front. And the work that the faculty and academic leadership have done to do that, I think, puts us in a really good position to try and address these systematically across the curriculum. And it's these kinds of solutions or strategies to confront the questions of racism, for example, that I think helps us move beyond incremental change at a college university campus. Applaud that effort.
Hi there. Thanks again, everybody. My question is probably mostly for Brian. We had originally planned to have the new Senior Diversity Officer, Sandra Mitchell, join us tonight. But I was just wondering, Brian, if maybe you could share a little bit of perspective about the position that was created. And I know that the two of you have some history working together at St. Norbert's, and maybe you can just share a few things in Sandra's absence, if that's possible.
I'd be happy to. Sandra wished she could be here, but she had a family emergency that took her away. Correct the record, we did not work together at St. Norbert or St. Catherine, but I do have great respect for her body of work and her expertise that she brings. I had mentioned helping to create conditions for systemic change and conditions for learning, robust learning in these ways. The hiring of a senior diversity officer was a decision that was made before I got here, and it was a very good decision to invite a level of leadership to help think for the two institutions how to do this work in a sustaining, systemic way. So the conversations that Sandra and I are having, she does report to me directly as the president. She'll be one of my 5 or 6 direct reports. She'll be a part of the strategy building for both institutions, and she's going to help us. She's one of our lead thought partners on how to imagine conditions, programs, activities, policies, practices, approaches that can lead us toward this vision that we have for an anti-racist, multicultural experience, to help us imagine what becoming community can be in a transformational inclusion approach. So the work that we'll be doing with Sandra is, it will not be pocketed, nor will it be focused on programs. We'll be doing that work, but she's going to be helping us think strategically. But how do we together find more effective ways to recruit and retain more diverse students? How do we work more systemically at how we recruit and retain more diverse faculty and staff? How do we work to create an environment, a climate that is truly responsive to the needs of our students because they're diverse? How do we approach these questions at an institutional level to create institutional support for the amazing work that is happening on the ground with faculty, with staff, and with students? It's that kind of thinking at the strategic level, institutional level, that will help make sure that EDIBJ work is incorporated in the strategic plan, that's incorporated into hiring practices, that's incorporated into our strategy on retaining and developing students, that it's helping us make sure that we're making sure that the educational experience of students, the curriculum and the curriculum is increasingly more sophisticated, and that this work is really never done. We're constantly trying to create a more sophisticated experience for students. As our understanding of these constructs evolves, so should how we apply them. And that's the kind of work that Sandra's going to help us with. And she started on January 3rd, and it just feels like she's already been here for quite a while, helping to get us moving, and also spending a fair amount of time looking at the incredible work that's already been done. I think St. Ben's and St. John's should be really proud of the work that's been evolving over the last some number of years to make a stronger commitment for both institutions across a wide array of possibilities.
Can I jump in here? I just want to give a specific. I meet with Sandra regularly, at least every other week, sometimes weekly. And we have a set meeting, and she brings an agenda, and we talk through what are some things that we need to be thinking about to make things better, at least on the academic side. And I take her advice and counsel. So this isn't somebody who's just way up here thinking in the cloud. This is somebody who's working with us on a very regular basis to help us think differently about how we do things. Sorry.
She meets with me as well, or I meet with her.
I think there's a question right here. Yep, and then we'll go to Mike over here next.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming out tonight. I think it shows a real dedication to this work. And I want to applaud everyone here. My name's Logan. I'm a senior here. And it's nice to see a lot of faces here. And I want to encourage you all to keep being committed to this work in your time here and start inviting more people so we can fill these seats. I'm a theology major, so I'm going to be coming at this lens of a theologian. Theology defines justice as giving everybody what they are due. What are the ways that you see, what are students do here in terms of justice? Practically, what is due to people? That's kind of my first question. My second question kind of revolves around building not only a multicultural campus, but an intercultural campus. I think we've done a great job at building spaces for people of different identities, whether it's Q+ or a joint Muslim association. People have spaces to gather where they are similar, but how can we work in creating not just a multicultural campus, but a truly intercultural campus where that exchange and encounter with people of other experiences can, interact and learn from each other? You guys can distribute answers to those questions however you please.
Yeah, so I think there was kind of two questions there, and maybe one person can take one and another the other.
I'll take the intercultural question. We are fortunate to have been selected by the American Council of Education to do the internationalization lab. We are teamed up with a group of colleges in our area, and St. Norbert is one of the colleges we're teamed up with. And we are working to evaluate what our intercultural connections are on campus and how we can make it better. And so there's going to be a report that's going to come out on this. and give us some things to work on. And so part of the lab is not just discovering what you need to do, but helping us have some goals and some metrics to reach what we think we need to do in that area. So that's the intercultural piece, and one particular thing that we're doing.
Mary wants to take the theological one.
I don't know about that.
I thought you might because of something you told me one time about a Benedictine institution.
What's that?
Should I try? And if I get it wrong, you can correct me. Will you please? That's a really good question. What is due to people? One of the things that Mary introduced me to was this idea that at a Benedictine institution or organization, you might not always get what you want, but all will receive what they need. And did I get that pretty close?
Got that correct.
And
Yep.
Mary introduced me to that, and I think it very much relates to the question. We make a promise to students when they are accepted here as students. We expect students to succeed because what we know about them at point of entry. We expect them to not only succeed, but we expect them to flourish. In order for students to flourish, there's a series of realities that when they come together, we can expect optimal growth. So I don't know if it's theological, but we do believe that this work, EDIBJ work, is core to being a Catholic, Benedictine, liberal arts, residential institutions focused on women and men. This core to who we are. It's not something separate or added on. Oftentimes, at some Catholic colleges, you can hear a narrative that puts these at odds with each other. Our mission traditions call us to this work, and inherent in that work is tension and conflict. Our moral responsibility is to navigate that tension, navigate that complexity, because it's a high purpose, it's the common good, it's the dignity of the people for which we have convened our community that we owe this work to. So it's that kind of duty that we have. And in that, because we're Benedictine, Catholic, liberal arts, residential, there's a communal piece to this. There's individual work, there's communal work. We're in this together for each other, for our individual flourishing, but more importantly, for the collective flourishing and the common good. So I really appreciate the theological frame for this, because this work is core to who we are, and it's holy work. And we're obligated to this work. It's a duty we have, a responsibility we have.
Question over here.
Can I just add one thing to that? So I think that's very well said, and that's beautiful. I think one of the practical ways that we can do that is by participating in events that you perhaps wouldn't normally participate in. So, I think I've seen an incremental change, a little bit of a shift this year, but it used to be like that, Black History Month, it would be the same group of people coming to those events. Women's Month is coming up, kind of the same group of people, but we're seeing more and more people now coming to these events. And I think part of it is just go out and learn and go to some of these events these events are put on for the entire student body, not just for a certain population. And I think one of the ways that we can become an intercultural community is by getting a diverse group of people in the room to have conversations around a certain topic or circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, I'm Marcus. I'm first year here. I'm thankful for y'all coming out and showing out today. My question is more of a diversity standpoint, because me as an African-American male that was born in the States, I kind of feel like I don't have a presence here. Like, I see that there's people of the same color as me, but they're not me, They're from the Bahamas, or they're from other areas that are not from the United States. And I feel like the population within the Black community here, I'm within a select few. Like, I feel like I'm a minority within a minority here. And my question would be like, what are some of those things that y'all putting out there to actually reach people that are like me, to come here and actually feel like we want to be here, you know?
Yeah. Well, you open up, Marcus, you open up some really good space for conversation. If you've been paying attention to things that have been happening here over the arc of time, over the last 15 years or so, we've seen a decline in total enrollment. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've also seen a decline in certain demographics within that student body. And some of that decline has happened in the 5-7 county area of the metro. And so with that, we've seen some decline in the racial and ethnic diversity, first generation, some of the socioeconomic changes. So we're spending a lot of time right now working very hard to create what I call a more sophisticated investment in our enrollment strategy, particularly in admissions. We have plenty of work to do to regain some of the lost market share in Minnesota. And our Dean of Admission, Corey Piper, is really working hard at that work. The admissions team are really redoubling their efforts. We believe that we can regain some of the market share we've lost in Minnesota, and we absolutely know we can regain in some of these important quality dimensions of our student body. And so the better we can invest in what I call the top of the enrollment funnel, the investments that we make to attract, to put leads or applications in the top of what we call the enrollment funnel. I don't want to get into all the jargon of admissions, but when you think about the enrollment funnel, you go from inquiries, applications, to accepts, to deposits, to enrolled, and that creates a funnel. And there's an art and a science to that work. In the last 5 to 10 years, the art and science of that has become much more sophisticated, with data analytics, with third-party lead generation, with a much more sophisticated, what we call omni-channel approach to communicating and marketing to students in different demographics, a more sophisticated set of messages to describe the beauty and the strength of this education. We're doing a lot of work right now to help sharpen that messaging, to help invest in the data analytics, to help drive that strategy. And I'm convinced, especially with our leadership in admissions, with Dean Piper, that we can generate some momentum. We're already seeing really strong progress just this year, with really tremendous increases in volume of applications, increases of acceptances, and we're going to be working really hard these next couple of months to generate more deposits. In doing all that work, we have to also focus in on how do we recruit more racially and ethnically diverse students. And this is not work that happens in one enrollment cycle. This is work that takes some time, but that we're deeply committed to make sure that we have the kind of experiences and people here that can make it rich and inviting. I see John Enriquez here, who's the Director of Institutional Research. I do not want to pick on him, but I do want to point out the fact that when I was a candidate, and I'll keep this short, when I was a candidate for the presidency, I did a lot of digging into the two places to learn even more about the two places. One of the little fun facts that I came across was some results from the National Survey on Student Engagement. This is a national survey that looks at how college students engage in their educational experience. And because the literature is so clear that when you engage college students in diverse experiences, they have higher satisfaction, they learn more, they graduate sooner. There's lots of great benefits from engaging students in diverse experiences, interacting with diverse people, different thoughts and ideas, interacting with different cultures and experiences. The responses relative to the comparative benchmarks had us scoring, to me, surprisingly low for two institutions that produce incredible outcomes. So we know having a more diverse student body, having a more diverse student experience is a powerful educational condition for learning. So it's for those reasons and others that we know this work is important, and we'll continue to improve on that. So you feel and you know that you have more people that you can relate to and connect to and have as role models here. Great question.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. And I think there's a question on this mic.
So I'm a little nervous, so please bear with me. But my concern it goes hand in hand with what just was being discussed. So 2 years ago, I was asked to translate for the Latino presentation for parents. And this was due to a staff member not being there. Reason, I don't know. So I kind of had to step in, right, because there was a room full of Latino parents, waiting for somebody to speak Spanish. Last year, the presentation, it didn't happen anymore. So it was a little sad to see that we got rid of that instead of actually finding someone who could do that presentation. And so the reason why I say it kind of goes hand in hand with what you all were just talking about is because that is how we will be able to recruit more people and more students, right? Is having the information accessible in the language that they want. And it's not just in Spanish, it's in other languages. And you can mainly see this with underrepresented communities. And I think that something that we need to take into consideration is that a lot of the the students who who come from underrepresented families are also this is their first time, seeing someone go to college.
Yeah.
So it's how do you expect a family to just kind of drop off their child and be all right, and go ahead and do it on your own, if it's not accessible for them in their language? So how are they supposed to know? It's so much easier for someone who comes from a household where English is their first language, and maybe they have the advantage of their parent being able to have a higher education as well. So, I'm wondering, and I'm suggesting that we try to do something about that, especially if we want people to feel comfortable, coming into an institution. That's that.
That is perfectly asked question. Thank you for asking. You did a beautiful job in doing it. We can do better with language translation in programs. We can also do better with language translation in print materials and website. We have to be accessible for people to understand what the opportunities are here. And you raised some really important questions about first-generation students. Our language, in terms of how we talk about the place, a registrar. What's a registrar? All the ways we create barriers to understanding access and what higher education can afford is particularly challenging for first-generation families. And frankly, families have become more and more important in the college choice process. And so Dean Piper is also working on a parent track, family track of communication and awareness so we can engage them. And they're part of the community as well. When a family sends a student to be at St. Ben's St. John's, we tell them that they're a part of the ecosystem and we should embrace them that way. And you make some really good points. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add too that that's probably part of what you said, President Bruess, of focusing on hiring a diverse faculty and staff. That has to be part of it. Yep. So, was there a question on mic 2? Yes, there we go.
Hi, my name is Dana Alcalá. This is my question, sorry, I'm really nervous. Why does the campus primarily use images of the BIPOC students on campuses on their website if it is not a true representation of the experience of students of color on our campus? And what can we all do to improve or to better reflect the realities of diversity on campus now and not when we get more diverse students?
Well, that would be, we have heard that. That's not the first time. I mean, we are very much aware of that. And in fact, we've just had a firm come in to take a look at our marketing materials and things and really trying to provide an accurate representation of the institutions through visuals. And so I do think it's something that we're aware of, and we really do want to try and make some changes there that better reflect the institution. So thank you for your comment.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Anyone else, anything to add?
No, except I just wanted to follow with Maite. I agree with your recommendation, and I think that's something that it's early enough that we could even make that change by this fall. So thank you.
I think there's a question, mic 1.
Yeah. Hi. I'm really nervous too, and I also I'm not gonna lie, I'm like very heated, and I'm like trying my best to like not get super emotional and like be extra. But like as a queer student here, genuinely, it has been tumultuous, and I like know it's dramatic to say, but kind of awful. My community is not represented here, and honestly, it's actively excluded. Being a queer athlete genuinely has been horrible. My teammates use queer slurs. They use gay in a derogatory way. People on the bus take pictures of me and they like send them around. And it's just honestly been shit. Like, I'm not gonna mince my words. Not to like also call out, but like people on the panel have said that we're a college that serves men and women. Verbiage like "you guys" has been used. And it's hard for me to have faith in events like these and hope that something is going to change when honestly it's not. Like, I've been here for 4 years. I've done these things before. I've filled out the surveys. I've been a part of the firms that come to our campus. I've been a part of this stuff. It doesn't, at least for me and what I've seen, it does not work. I don't feel included. I feel hella excluded. I like wish I had a question, and I like don't want to be negative and end on a sour note, but like in sum, I would just say like a bucket of shit. Sorry.
Thank you, Sean, for sharing your experience of your time at St. Ben's and St. John's. I think one of the things that when I hear students' experiences of bigotry, specific ones, like were just mentioned, I think that it's important that we do something about that, in particular. So I know there wasn't a question in there, but I think student development has rolled out this bias response kit. There's a place to report things. I don't know that students always have faith in that process, if I'm being 100% honest. And so I think maybe, Mary, if you could talk about what is that and what is the process? What is the bias response kit? What happens when somebody reports something? Where does that go? And then what happens?
Sure, I can talk about that. A couple of things. Sean, you ended with, "I'm sorry," and I don't think you should have to apologize for your experience and for telling your truth. It's something that we need to hear, and it tells me that we have a lot more work to do. So that said, we do have a bias response. I get concerned, though, when I hear like a whole team has a culture of this. So that's something, it could come through bias incident, but to me that's bigger and something I think that needs to be addressed, and we'll deal with that later. But so bias response is a new initiative that is one of the policies or processes or procedures that go to the systemic issues around us. So a person, anybody in the community, could experience a bias incident. And a bias incident is different than a discriminatory incident. Discrimination has a legal threshold or has a legal proof. But bias is just, it could be a negative behavior that's been caused on behalf of somebody's protected class. And so bias has a lower standard, if you will, a lower entry point than discrimination. Bias could be discrimination, but discrimination is more than bias. So I'll just say that. So we really wanted a way for the community to be able to easily access a report form where they could report at any time, 24/7 online, an incident that happened to them. That then immediately sends a ping to the bias response team. They review it and determine what actions need to be taken. And it could mean that perhaps that person needs to be contacted immediately and provided some resources. It could mean an investigation into the incident. It could mean just meeting with that person to find out more information and determine what the next steps are. Bias incident and the process allows us to respond much more quickly than we have in the past. And then finally, this report, this bias report, allows us to keep track of the reports that we're receiving and to reflect back the kind of information that we're getting and the kind of bias people are experiencing on our campuses, which then allows us to create educational interventions around certain topics or subjects. And so we're hoping that the process will provide a data point for us as well. So it went into effect in November. And I encourage you to look it up, just Google bias, and it will come up and it will show you the whole process, how it works, and we've worked really hard to make the report form very succinct and simple. So I always encourage everybody, when in doubt, fill it out.
I would like to address the concerns that were raised. You raised a lot of important points, and sexuality is something that sometimes we have blinders. And I know that here at St. Ben St. John's, we have a system here that makes it more important for us to reflect on the difficulty of already setting up two institutions in a binary way. That isn't the experience of a lot of people, most people probably. And what we need to do is to reflect on that and to think about how that system is set up, is perpetuating certain kinds of attitudes and confront it. And I think that what you've raised and what you've said is very painful for me to hear, but it also is a moment for us to be thinking about how the taken for granted assumptions that we have of saying things like a college for men and a college for women is very difficult for some people. I also know another thing that's difficult. I was here when we were one of the first Catholic colleges to deal with transgendered policy. And we did that. However, I also know that it's more difficult for a student at St. Ben's St. John's than would be at a coeducational institution, because you have to enroll in a different institution when you have made a very difficult, life-changing decision. And it makes it more public. And I know that for many people that can be very difficult and humiliating. And these are some things that I know that we have to think about. So I just wanted to let you know, I hear you. I'm not going to say I understand, because I don't. Because here I am, this old, white, cisgendered guy. I know what that is, right? But I can say, honestly, I hear you, and we have a lot of work to do to think through those things.
Yeah, and I think the work is important because the admission policy is always on the front end, and then the experience here, is sort of a separate,
Right.
a separate thing. So, I see a bunch of students that are lined up. I'm gonna go Mike 2. Floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Vanessa, and I'm a senior. My fall semester junior year, I studied abroad, and our advisor was terrible. He made our experience really, really bad, and there was a lot of microaggressions and racist behavior. And I feel like when I didn't feel comfortable sharing my experience at the time because I feel like there might be some retaliatory action. And my question is, do you guys have some sort of vetting process for that kind of behavior when it comes to faculty and staff? And I feel like after I came back, I reported it and I met with some people, but then I just feel like it kind of died down and nothing really ever came of it, or nothing really ever happened.
Yeah, I take these things seriously. I'm sorry to hear that, but I think the key is to I feel like you can speak up, but I also understand there's always a power differential, and that makes it even more difficult. And so what we have to do is have policies like we are starting now with the bias incident, where you can just report that in electronically. And that's good that you can do that, because when you're abroad, you can feel really isolated. And I understand that. And we need to break down those barriers for students to feel comfortable to report. But you just mentioned one of the things that makes it difficult, which is feeling the power differential. And when those get reported, certainly to my office, then we take that very seriously, the power differential, and make it clear to those that we have conversations with that there is no retaliation. Somebody will be disciplined, probably lose their position, if they retaliate against somebody who has brought forward in a good faith effort behavior that should not be tolerated.
Yeah, and I think situations like these are also really difficult, because if any decisions were made, that's not going to be something that is going to be publicly shared, right? Any personnel decisions, things like that, that's not something that the institution can say something about it. And so I think when you're a student who experiences something, you report something, and then you're like, hey, what happened here? In your experience, nothing happened because you didn't see it, right? And
that's true for students too. If
Yeah.
a student is disciplined for academic dishonesty or something, we don't share that.
Right, but I think that's also, I think what this highlights is how important it is that students trust that when they report something,
Right.
something's going to happen.
Right.
And
Right.
absent that trust, it's very, the experience is, I reported this, I had some conversations, I have no idea if anything actually happened. And so I think, Vanessa, thank you for sharing your experience, because it highlights one of the ways in which, even if our system works,
Right.
absent that trust, I don't know that the experience of going through that system is going to be one in which a student walks out saying, oh yeah, like that worked. So it's a really tough situation.
Thank you.
Malik, can I just do a little tag onto that? Vanessa, thank you for sharing. One of the things that she explained, I think, was pretty common, in that students at the time don't necessarily feel like they can report for a whole host of reasons. There isn't a time limit on when you can report. If you don't feel comfortable with the time for whatever reason, that's fine. Let's try and find someone who you trust, who can help you think about how to report it. Even if it's a week later or a month later or a semester later, we can find someone that you can trust to bring that forward. And I want to acknowledge the fact that it's oftentimes the case, more often than not, that immediately following a situation, you don't feel like you can. So if you're ever feeling that, know that we can find someone for you to trust to tell your story and to determine if a complaint is appropriate, how to bring that forward confidentially within the context of the policy.
There's a question over here.
Hello, my name is Liz. I'm a senior here, proudly first gen and Mexican American student. I don't think I have a question, it's more of a concern. Over the course of my 4 years here, I've seen the fact that in the Latinx community, our numbers have decreased significantly, and a lot of that has been due to financial aid reasons and just like cost in general, personally for me too. And I would say, I just don't know as far as like efforts or what are the possibilities to do or create more scholarships like iLead, just contribute more money or help to BIPOC students to attend universities or CSBSJU. And then Dana had a similar story.
Hi, I'm back again, Dana Alcalá. Similar to Liz's concerns, I have a total of 5 friends, all who started freshman year with me, who have all had to leave the school due to financial issues. My first year, was not supposed to come back for my second year because I was told I had 2 options. I could leave for a year, come back when I can pay, or 2, get a loan. I am paying my education by myself, And so when I'm told those are my only two options, when I want to make a name for myself and I want to make it when I'm a first generation student, what are my options? How can we do better for those students?
And I think also going off of that, because I knew that the answer was always going to be loans, 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 I stopped going to financial aid. I started connecting with other people, just like going through just the CSBSJU email, like who's in charge of like alum relations, donor relations, to be honest, because I was sick and tired of financial aid, literally just always loans, loans, loans. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm just not. So, yeah.
Well, questions of affordability and how that changes over the course of 4 years, how students understand what the costs are, what the options are, is a complex body of work that we're working very hard on. There's a lot of effort. In fact, I'll be leaving on Friday for a trip, coming back for 3 days, gone for another trip, back for 3 days, gone for another trip. And what I'm doing almost exclusively on these travels right now is working with donors and alums and friends to generate resources. To raise resources, to improve the size of our endowment, to create more opportunities like I Lead, so we can help more students navigate these difficult gaps. And it's a complicated set of questions and ideas because on some levels, we're doing exceptionally well comparatively. But then when you go into the individual narrative, we have students that were not making it happen. So if about a third of our students graduate with no debt, and we have two of the lowest federal loan default rates that I've ever seen, for the last 3 years at St. Ben's, it was less than 1%. In the cohort of 2019, we had one student out of 457 students that defaulted on her loan. I mean, just incredible numbers. And yet at the same time, you have 5 friends. You yourself are struggling. And that's a story for others that other students have. So I think there's a really unbelievably inspiring story of resilience and persistence that you represent. And just know that the institution is working hard. We've got more work to do. Some of the survey research that was referenced earlier with brand and awareness and what people know about us, people that are prospective students or not prospective students, when we looked at prospective students for St. Ben's, St. John's, prospective students' parents, alums from both institutions, and people that don't know us, the top question that they all had was price and affordability. It's a real complex body of work that we're working hard on, and we know we have more to do. There are more options than just loans. Sometimes in a certain circumstance, that might be all that's right there. But for some students, either they've taken enough loans or they don't want to take any, or what the circumstances are. So in those moments, they're tough. But there are always more than just loans as an option. And we can surely do better on communicating that and engaging with students. One of the things I hope we can tackle as a part of a strategic plan is to have more resources, more work around student employment and financial literacy, and doing more work with students around these questions of affordability to create a higher understanding and engagement and interaction between the students and the institution so we can bridge those gaps more consistently with less difficulty.
I'd like to jump in and talk about the navigation part. It's okay. You mentioned your first generation, and me too. Right. And I know what that's like to not know how to navigate the structure. And something we need to look at is how do we have some advocates on campus who would be in key staff areas who would be able to help students to do the navigation of things that they and their families are not accustomed to navigating. Let's face it, higher education is a very different kind of world and a different kind of structure, and if you don't understand the navigation, you can get lost. And that's another part of belonging and another part of inclusion, and it's something that I'm going to be looking at now that we've pulled together a lot under the provost, and how we can find those kind of positions to help students get the help that they need.
Yeah, I'm just keeping an eye on the time, so wherever the JDI fellas are, back there. Oh, so you just give us the word, but I know that I see more questions, and I want to make sure I get to them. Is there a question? Is Rosemary? Do you have a question or statement? Why don't you take it away?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Rosemary, as Malik said. I'm kind of nervous, so please bear with me. Well, first, thank you for being here. And, okay, so 2 things. One, when you guys in the conversations about, like, talking, like, the rates of people of color and who are enrolled in the college, you guys kept talking like we were statistics, not as, like, people in the community, so that kind of just bothered me. Sorry. But I just wanted to follow up on like one of the points that were brought up from another student about microaggressions in the class, like from professors. There's much talk about how students can get involved in like increasing diversity, being more involved in campus. But how about with professors? I don't really know how, like what professors are like in their teachings or what they're supposed to know, because like in the classroom it's more like but like dedicated for a specific group of students, but like it doesn't bring everyone together. Or like with professors, like making these certain comments or just like not having the time to want to get to know their students or like their background and their cultures, their traditions.
Excellent question, and we have started to make some significant changes there. So this year, for the faculty voted to put in the handbook, the faculty handbook, which is the kind of the contract and the rules that faculty have to follow. It's kind of the faculty's J book, okay? So they put new rules for themselves. And we have had DEIJ training, but it's been all voluntary. Now it's not voluntary anymore. Every faculty member is expected to do DEIJ training every year. And that can be part of workshops, part of programming that we bring in. We'll have some selection of online trainings for people. So that's ongoing. Second, to make sure that people are incorporating this into their teaching. For the first time, we've now put into the faculty handbook, DEIJ is going to be a component of a faculty member's review, tenure, and promotion. So they have to show that they are not only doing ongoing training, but it is part of their professional development. And President Bruess mentioned the becoming community. I think it's important that that's a verb, becoming, because this is going to be ongoing work. This is going to be work that we have to keep doing. We've started this work. The faculty needs to be doing it, and I'm going to be making sure that when people come up for reviews and things, that we get to see what is being done.
And I think we're going to go really quick because I'm getting the word about time, but I see there's 2 questions and I want to get them, so can we go to this mic first?
Is this the speed round?
Hi, my name is Annika. I'm a junior here at St. Ben's. I recently attended the Best Party curriculum by Project Embrace, and I learned that the Project Embrace grant is not being renewed. And to me, this just feels like a big step backwards in keeping students safe, especially Bennies and students that identify outside of the gender binary, and it upholds a culture that tolerates sexual violence. So my question is, why is the grant not being renewed, and what or who will continue the work that Project Embrace has done?
I can take that one. The grant was not renewed because the Department of Education didn't renew it. We submitted it.
Justice, right?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. We were actually really surprised by that. It would have ended in January, but I just navigated some funds to be able to keep Danny through May, because we're expressly looking at what are the components that we can carry forward. So just to we had efforts before we had the grant, and we will have efforts after the grant. The grant just allowed us to enhance the work that we were doing. We are still just as committed as we were before we got the grant. We were lucky that we got the grant for 2 years. Had we known we weren't going to get it renewed, I wouldn't say we wouldn't have done it, but normally when you apply for a grant like that, it gets renewed. So there were a lot of institutions that weren't, and we're still trying to figure out exactly why. But I can tell you that we are absolutely committed to the work and have extended her employment by 6 months specifically to help us transition from the grant to carrying on now without those funds. So thank you, and it's a very good question. And thank you for being involved in the BEST curriculum. That's really, really good work, so thank you.
And then I think there was one more on mic 2 here.
What I'm about to say is more of an experience and kind of sort of like a question per se. So last semester I dealt with an incident with another fellow student saying the N-word with the hard R, right? And I reported him and all that stuff. And my thing was like, why did I have to do these different things? Like, they were suggesting I should move, I should do these different things. Like, why shouldn't he have to do these things, but I have to, Because it just made me feel like I did something wrong, versus I didn't really do nothing wrong. I did the right thing by reporting them, because if I did how I emotionally wanted to do, I'll be the wrong person in that limelight, looking at my feelings and my personal mindset right there. I could have went to his room, beat him up and all these different things, but me reporting them, it's just added more stress and more problems to me, because then I got people asking me 500 million questions. I got all these different things going on. They asked me to move, but I shouldn't have to move because I, so what are some things that y'all could do to kind of counteract that?
I agree, and I've heard that before too, like the burden becomes on the person that, it becomes on you, and you're kind of, why should that happen to me? So I think one of the best things that we can do is have a conversation to kind of say, what is the best way you want this handled? And it all depends on the situation, right? But we'd want to work with that individual and the circumstances around that situation. I would, I shouldn't even say, but I would hope my team would be astute enough that they can work with the individual in that particular circumstance at that time. And this is something that we have heard from students. So it's something that I think we are very aware of. Might not always get it right, but I think it is something that we're working hard to be aware of and attentive to.
Well, I think you got a question?
Well, yeah, kind of one last question, wrap up, and thank you again for you four for helping us put this panel together, and for everybody that came tonight and was willing to come up to the mic in a kind of high pressure environment and share personal stories and ask some vulnerable questions. So personally, I really appreciate everybody that came out to listen, to share your experiences, and I guess this is a unique opportunity, one that I have never really seen during my time at St. Ben's, St. John's. There's probably more questions in the audience. There's probably friends and more people who have ongoing questions. And I guess to wrap things up, maybe, is there an opportunity going forward? How could people maybe get in contact with you folks if they have specific questions, or who do they contact? We talked about the bias reporting system, but what is the process beyond this? And that could kind of be a nice wrap up as we're coming up on our end time. So thanks again.
Well, you can always contact me, and you can always see me at lunch, either in the Reef or Gorecki. And I mean that. Just come up to me, talk to me. If we need to set up a meeting, I'll set up a meeting and make sure that I hear you, because I want to hear you and I want to find out what we can do better. And I'm open to your stories.
Yeah, so I think first, thanks again to the JDI for organizing this, but I don't think this should be perhaps the only event like this that we have, and that perhaps it can happen again ongoing. But I think the other piece, just to share an answer, so I'll take some of this one. The DEIJ Coordinating Council right now is in the process of building out our webpage, and that is also going to have a contact form, and that is also a group of faculty and staff that are committed to this work on campus. There's a number of Coordinating Council members here, and I'm going to call you out because I see Amanda right there, I see John right here, but there's a number of other faculty and staff that are on that committee. I think there's 9 of us. And so once that is up, that will have a contact form on it, and that contact form is exactly for these types of sort of, inquiries. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the place to go with a specific issue, like I was in this classroom and I experienced a microaggression. That's not the form for that. But it is a place to say, what are we doing about X, or this larger issue? So that's going to be another way, Sam, that students and faculty and staff can contact that group and sort of get on our priority list for what we're looking at. So we hope to have that done by the end of the semester. And then President Bruess.
I was just going to say, Sam, just to the whole group, but Sam, your question kind of sparked this, is that, when I was leaving graduate school, my goal was to become a dean of students. I was a dean of students in my first real job out of grad school, and I've been engaging with students, listening to students, and working on their behalf this my entire career. So I was asked to come to this event, and I came. So if you have other events that I can make, I will join you. And I think it's important to also note that a number of you got up and said how nervous you were. That's your body telling you that what you're saying is important. But know that we're here, we're listening because we're in this with you. And so I appreciate those that were willing to take that risk. And if you ever think there's a time when you don't think there's someone who knows you or listens or loves you, there is. And so let's make sure we can connect you with those people in those difficult moments. If I can lend a listening ear or some perspective to this matter at any point in time, if I'm in town and available, I'll be there. Thank you for inviting me tonight.
And I just want to add, I have a lot of my incredible staff here tonight. Malik is one of them. Jody Terhar's here. I can't even, there's probably others here. I think Mike was here earlier. But I just, my hour, I'm Monday, Wednesday, Friday at St. Ben's, and Tuesday, Thursday at St. John's. My office is in Sexton at St. John's, and it's at the lower level of the Academic Service Building at St. Ben's. So if you want to reach out to any of my team members or to me, this is what we're here for, and I'm available. I can also meet you someplace, and I'm always happy to buy a student a cup of coffee. So if it's a conversation you want to have just one-on-one, happy to do that with you.
Well, with that, thank you to our panelists for being here and answering questions tonight. Appreciate it. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to the audience for taking the time on Monday night. I know that there's a lot of places that you could be, but very much appreciative for you to be here. For those that spoke, also appreciative, but for those that heard those that spoke, it was important for you to be here and to hear that. Keep an eye out for events that are happening. There is a whole bunch happening on campus, even between now and spring break. And of course, my office is in the Multicultural Center at St. Ben's, Murray Hall, and I have a pretty open door if you were in there, and I saw a number of faces of folks who were in the center today. I'm usually hanging out, talking to students, meeting with students, so I'm also available as well.
I have one more thing. I have heard loud and clear, you want me to call a regular snow day one of these days. I got it. Yeah.
I have two.
I've received your message.
I have two, and I know this is just more surveys, but they're really important because we do use this data to inform our thinking. The Sexual Misconduct Climate Survey is out right now. We do have enough Benny responses to have 95% accuracy, but we do need more from St. John students. So if you want to know what you can do, please fill out the survey. The second survey that just went out is the campus climate survey in regard to DEIJ. And we would really appreciate it if people would fill that out as well. I know that they're surveys and they take time, but they're really important in terms of informing us where the community is at a certain point in time. So wanted to plug those two. Thank you.